Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new edition of Low-Code Café. Today we have episode 37. My name is Bogdan Litescu. I'm the owner and founder of Plant an App. And for those of you that are new, I see a few new faces. This is an event that we do every week, and it's focused on the technical aspects, on the building of low-code applications. And we do this every week. We bring in our team, we bring in the community, and we sometimes show what comes up in our support channels, like some interesting cases. Nearly in every episode, we get to build something with low code, like we'll do today. And this event is recorded. Our recordings are available on our YouTube channel, and we'll post the link in the chat in a few moments. So today we'll follow the same agenda that we have every week. I will give you some updates, and after that I will pass it on to the rest of the team to give us some updates from support, and then we get to do the low-codes, the hands-on part. I will just start by saying this. Today it was a special day at Plant an App that you'll get to see more in depth next week. Today we had an internal hackathon, and what we did in this hackathon was playing with other low-code and no-code platforms. So we organized our team in sub-teams and got to build the same system. And this is something that we did both for ourselves, to understand how we position ourselves compared to other platforms out there, but also to be able to help our customers and our leads whenever we have this question. Like what's the difference between Plant an App and Bubble and Retool and Mendix and others? So now we have very good content, very good answers to these questions that will help you and will help maybe presenting to your customers as well. But first things first, and today it will be building the judging app that we'll be using next week when our teams will start pitching and presenting all the other low-code platform. So it will be a very cool event next week. Cool. So let's get to showing and to playing with Plant an App this week. So first, I will pass it to our head of support, Dale, to show us what's hot from the support, from the trenches, from the support channel.
Great. Good morning. So from the trenches today, have a few things to talk about, and one for our DNN Sharp customers, we have made some changes on our download pages, and I wanted to point those out. But the download pages gets a little is for DNN Sharp customers. For Plant an App, we have a one-click update, and that's an even better and far easier scenario to work with. But on our download pages, you'll notice that the minimums now have been updated to reflect our minimums and maximums. And so it's if you're installing software, it's really worth checking out these minimums and maximums. And I'll just point out that there is a link to our full compatibility and upgrade matrix. And this gives you all the information of all the ins and outs of versions and compatibilities and minimums and maximums. But again, the far easier scenario is within Plant an App. You can see when you're in the configuration section, you can see your version number down here in the lower left. And so I have a system that's version 1.10. And if you use the updates section, you can see that all the products are at version 1.10 or so. All the main products are. Some of the others are slightly back. We don't release versions on everything, but it's all a very controlled release. And so we have an update available. We're actually up to 1.12 release, but while I do other things here, I just want to point out how easy this is. So we say that we want to update to version 1.11 and then say, yes, we want to install, and it goes about doing that. So I'm going to leave that alone for a minute, but any of you that have worked through individual product updates, you'll know that that process is far more involved in that you have to do them one by one. While that's going on, I wanted to point out that we had 3 different cases that crossed the help desk this week, and they all involved CSS. So I just wanted to mention it and point out the kinds of things that you can get into and resolve with CSS. So one of those, a customer who I believe is even on call, had an issue with the image editor field, and this is how this field is supposed to work. If you select image and pick a field, you get an image inside an image editor, and you can scale it and work with it. What we were finding is that under different themes, and so I'm going to pick a different theme. I'm actually going to pick our page builder theme, but in his case, he tried 3 or 4 different themes and was getting an odd response, an odd setup in each of those. So I'm going to flip to our page builder theme, and when we select an image, and these happen to be very, very wide images taken, for example, on a cell phone, and getting very, very high pixel count. But when we picked it, we're seeing this very, very large area to work with. And in the case of the themes in question, it was actually mispositioning the image and very, very tall. And so the CSS of your theme can impact that. Now, I can't take credit for this. The client actually found the answer, but the tool has the capability to fix the issue. So I'm going to go, I almost went in the old way, you saw me, but I'm going to go in the page builder way. And if we edit this form and look at the image editor in the UI settings section, we can do some styling. And this is the solution he found, where we just explicitly said that the height and width of this canvas was limited to a particular size. So when we save that, now if we select an image, same image, we get a far more controlled experience. So just realize that the image sizes that you're using and the CSS that you have and the tools that you're using may all impact to give a result that you don't like, and may have to adapt for either through the theme or through some custom CSS. So I'll get into custom CSS a little bit more in a minute, but that was this first case where the image editor interaction with themes. I had another one where CSS interfered with that existed on a site that was upgraded, where that CSS had some odd behavior. So I noticed when I went into entities in the app builder module and started to hover some of these controls over here to the right, that I was just getting disappearing content, and it made no sense to me. But the fact that it's happening interactively pointed me quickly to the thought that it's CSS. So within your settings in the custom CSS section, I went and took a look at this, at the CSS, and isolated it to this particular CSS that I'd set up years earlier to deal with a particular issue with Telerik that doesn't even exist anymore. And so it was a trial and error. There's quite a bit of CSS that was in there, but I figured out what it was. And so now when we refresh, and I'm going to do a shift refresh to make sure that or a control refresh to make sure I get the refreshed content. Now when I go and hover, it works as designed. So stuff that you have, especially in an older or upgraded site, and you've done some custom CSS, that can interact with our content. In that case, one of the things that I suggested that we do is to just, if you copy the custom CSS out into a separate notepad, if you can remove it for a brief time, and then use that as a debugging step to see if the symptom goes away, which is the first step I did. I took everything out and the symptom went away. So I knew it was something in the CSS file, the custom CSS, that was the problem. So that's really, again, 3 different cases that came across my desk, and they were all involving CSS. I wanted to point out that we have a very brief, in our low-code feature focus section, there is an action grid CSS formatting. It really talks very clearly and in 3 minutes about how to identify elements that you want to control the formatting, and then adding some formatting to it. So the tools are there for you if you run into issues. So I'm going to jump back here to our system that we're upgrading, and now we see that all of our tools are up at 5.11. It was 1 click. It didn't take any effort for me at all. And I'm still a little behind. I can click the 1.12 version and get fully up to date. But one click update is one of the great reasons to be part of the Plantain app, certainly at least from an ease of maintenance standpoint. Final thing I'll point out is if you look at your chat window, I've put a bunch of links out there for you. So that includes the how to subscribe to Plantain app, where you can find that our feedback form for this webinar, the low-code feature focus, and that particular styling, that CSS 3-minute video, all out there on our on the chat box. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Reza. Reza is going to be presenting today both his the updates from the for the product, as well as the hackathon content. So Reza, if you'll jump in.
Zoom gets me every time. You'd think a year into this thing.
It hides, it hides.
All righty, so hey everyone. Yeah, so really excited about today. So I'm not gonna take a long time with the product roadmap. I wanna give a quick update on it, but just kind of wanted to set the stage for what we're doing today, and that it was a really big deal today. The team, you know, we're not huge. We're small but mighty, and the team works really hard on the products, on implementation, on support. And so for us to really be able to give them the space and take a day to check out what our competitors are doing. It's not like we've never looked, but this space is evolving and changing fast. We're evolving and changing fast. And, you know, it was time for a fresh read and to go deep. And rather than, you know, myself or Bogdan, who we were always out there looking and evaluating and trying things out, but, you know, we wanted to get it in the hands of our developers and get it from their lens, right? How is our competitor handling workflows or business logic, from the implementation team, who, you know, are the ones actually using to build apps with this sort of thing, versus the developer's lens, which is, wow, that's a great technique, or can we implement something like that, you know? And so really wanted to go deep and give the various roles on our teams the ability to do that, and wanted to make it fun for them as well, and kind of exciting. And so next week at this time, we'll actually be showing a little show and tell, and to make it more interesting, we want to do some judging, and so we'll need some judges, and but we want to open this up a lot wider and to like and make things a little more interesting, and get kind of everyone in the game. So anyone who's participating, like an audience member of the webinar, you'll be able to kind of vote and give some ratings, not judging, but kind of people's choice type thing. And we'll have maybe some people's choice awards, and if there's some ties or scores are even, and what's going to be the tiebreaker, it'll be the votes that you all give. And so in order to pull off, sounds cool, but not easy, right? And so in order to pull such a thing off, gonna need an app. And so that's what I'm gonna show you today. And in the spirit of, you know, the team had a small window, 1-day window to do this today, and still had some duties to juggle kind of at the beginning and the end of the day. And so I kind of wanted to show some solidarity, and I took my approach of this as my own mini hackathon. And so I got up really early today and started when they did. And when the notice came out right before the webinar to stop, I stopped. And we'll see how far I got. And hopefully I can get a little bit of crowdsourcing help and see if we can do the kind of interesting part. So before I jump all the way into that, let's take a look at the roadmap. I'm hoping I have the right window here. I don't, yep. All right. So real quick update on 113, we're still on track. Next week will be our last full week of development and kind of just UAT and making sure we're feeling like we're good and gonna code freeze. There'll be a release candidate available week of April 7th then. So if anyone wants to get in on that, or if there's some features or things that you're waiting on, there's a lot of good stuff in this one, a lot of small enhancements, fixes, things from the community forum. Let us know, let me know, and I will definitely make that available. Kind of big ticket items I'll touch on. A couple of them I think are really gonna be game changers. One is being able to have namespaces or groupings in your workflows. The team's being a little ambitious with this one and wants to get it in this release as well, to be able to have it for entities at the same time. And so as we're kind of building together today and I'm showing you stuff, I'll show you where, in tokens, we already have kind of that capability with namespaces. And so we're even wanting to unify that so that you'll have a group or a namespace name that you can use across your tokens, across your workflows, across your entities, and really start grouping and organizing your application and the components and your building blocks better. I think that's one that until you get your hands on it, you won't appreciate how powerful it is. When we look at how big of an app I was able to make in 6 hours today, you'll see why grouping would be really handy. Other one is the ability to run workflows as a token. So, workflows are very powerful, and we've had sessions on those in the past. The only thing is right now, you can only execute them as an action from within like a form or a grid, a listing, schedule them to run automated. But, workflows don't just have to execute business logic, right? They can figure things out for you, calculations, look up values, determinations, even a single one, and do some really involved complex things. And then as its output, just give you a value. For example, today in this judging application, there's going to be different judges that are rating and judging across many different criteria for the hackathon. And we'll need a way to get in there, look at what all the judges gave in a certain area, tally all that up, and get a single score back for a team. And be able to use that in a form or just show it on the screen, right? And so being able to drop a token in anywhere that you want, anywhere that some data is needed, whether it's output on the screen, like you were going to be building a display output template and something that looks nice and pretty, you can just drop a token in, and that token will be the result of a workflow that runs in real time. So that one I think is going to be huge, and it's going to change kind of the world for how powerful things that you can do. Last one I wanted to touch on, there's some really good ones here, but I think, as far as kind of game changers, and I ran into this one all over the place in this hackathon and was like, man, I wish this was 1 week from now because I'd be using this. But currently in the system, when you create an entity in your data model, you have to specify a role and what permission that role has to work with that data, to even view that data. And that means someone has to be signed in. And that means that you're potentially exposing the UI and the page and the application just so you can run queries and pick up some of the powerful actions that come from reading the data in your data model. And so we're going to have like a all users type pseudo role. And you'll be able to give view access without exposing anything else. And that means your listings. So a lot of workarounds right now are writing queries or exposing things and then trying to hide them out of the menu and things. So all that goes away. And you can even show things to users then that aren't signed in, right? That's also kind of a limitation you have right now if you're trying to work out of the box, is that this is all excellent and fast if a person's logged in with a role. If they don't have a role, you're writing queries at best. So I think, DNN 9.9 support as well. All that's testing out really, really well. Haven't found any issues. So I'm very confident we'll be certifying that as well. So without any more delay, let's jump in. And just real quick, kind of take a look. I had some criteria I shelled out for myself as far as what I wanted to try to accomplish requirements-wise. And the story of this application, I say I've got 6 hours in. I would say at least 2 to 3 hours of those was really just thinking about, the data model and how all this stuff is going to relate to each other. And I know we do a lot of building together, and we tend to keep it simple, or when we go deep on a piece of functionality, integrating with a different system, making a powerful workflow that does something. But I'm kind of excited to show this one and look together in the spirit of hacking and share what I found. Is the deeper you go and the more complex it gets, you really start having to think and start kind of testing the limits of the system. And I found places where it was very forgiving for me to explore and not have a big complicated data diagram built up front, and other places where I did have to hit my whiteboard that when I'm not green screened is right behind me and do a little bit of data mapping and thinking about, mocking up of how this would work. And we'll take a look at what I came up with. But I wanted the ability, obviously, to have an event. And once I started creating them, this was an interesting case. The word event in SQL database language is a reserved keyword. That is something that you can use it to name your entity in your data model but then if you're going to write queries or other things, you need to use brackets to let the database engine know, I don't mean your keyword, I mean this thing that I gave it a name of. So I wanted to avoid any sort of reserved words and having to keep track of places where I'm using brackets and not using brackets. Now the system out of the box will do all this bracketing and stuff for you. And that's what I'm saying. I could have called it event, and out of the box, everything will work beautifully. It's only when I start trying to go outside of the box that I'll start having queries and things fail, because those are reserved keywords. So I ended up calling it a challenge. And I did challenge myself in this. I could have hard coded a lot of things, made kind of a disposable app just for this one-time hackathon. But I wanted to be able to kind of show a little deeper. And I think, if this is successful, and I think it will be for us, we're going to do this again and do different types of these again, and maybe get you all in the game, and we can play and have some competitions and build some cool stuff. So I said, okay, I want this thing to live on, which means I need to be able to really set up challenges, right? And I just kind of thought, what's the main kind of things that I'm going to want to have here? Obviously, a name for the thing, start and end date stuff. I need to make sure I support, judging both the date and the criteria for it, and some overview kind of requirements. What is the challenge that we're trying to solve? So pretty straightforward, nothing rocket science there. I determined that I would need to extend beyond the roles that come with the system and have 3 kind of personas or types of users that are going to interact with the system, right? A judge, a team member, and the people, right? And so what I mean by people is, you can't judge, you're not a judge, but you can vote, which can influence the judging, right? And some questions I kind of had and things I'm thinking about is, well, how many votes can someone have? Because if everyone's just saying everyone's great, because we're all nice people and everything is probably going to knock your socks off when we see what the team built, it kills the spirit of it, right? So I said maybe there's only 3 votes or ratings, teams you can pick as your favorites, so that those votes become a little more precious and mean something. And can you take a vote back? So you're voting along the way, and then you say, oh my goodness, I know I gave my vote there, but this team really did something special. I want my vote back, So these were just some considerations I had. So obviously, you're going to need the ability to register a team as a team, and the team members then can be added to the team. Something cool I'd like to do with it, I didn't get to this here. In the past lives I've been a part of and also put on several hackathons. And one of the things I always found is that, sure, there are people that, hey, you want to get together and do a hackathon? Let's be a team. There are other people who say, I want to do it, but I don't have anyone else to do it with. I'm looking for a team. And then there's teams that are looking for someone maybe with a skill set where they need an extra member. And so thought it would be cool also if you could see teams that maybe are saying, hey, we're open to members, and you could request to join that team, that kind of thing. And that's the beauty of low code. The iterative nature here is all of this can be layered in. Let's get the basics and the block and tackle stuff in, and make sure that this data model is sound before we get too far along and too fancy and too complicated, because it becomes a little more painful to backtrack if you've painted yourself into a corner, right? And so want to definitely have support for prizes. Wouldn't be much of a competition if you didn't win anything. And this is where things start getting very interesting. So I had to think a lot about this one. This was a good hour of mine in noodling and playing and exploring a couple of different models here. But in the end, I decided to go for, and you can even see my other thought requirement. Hey, since this is for Low-Code Café, would it be better to engineer this in a more dynamic way? But it's a little riskier because I don't know if I can pull it off or if it'll be done or if it's going to work, and being a little vulnerable there. And so I could have just hard coded like categories, right? Did you present well? Did you meet the technical requirements? And these could have been properties in an entity, but then they're static. Maybe the next challenge doesn't have that same requirement, or it's not worth as much. And so I said, okay, I actually want to be able to define pretty robust kind of themes and areas to group, and allow you to specify different judging criteria and associate those to different challenges. Reuse them between challenges if you want, but sometimes maybe we're doing one that's for AI or machine learning. We're not this time, but maybe next time we are. Do I really want to go create another field in a table and stuff? And why I especially did this is a pattern you're really, if you haven't already, you will run into. As you start making some ready for the real world type applications, and ones that aren't so internal facing or have a handful of users, and you're going to need some flexibility. And this is where you're going to start really running into, you know, okay, I've got entities, I've got list of entities, but what happens when I go past that? And we'll see that here in a second in the data model, and explore a little bit how deep this can go, and maybe where we're finding some boundaries. And that's great, because if we find a boundary, we can think of what would be a great way to solve this, and we can build that into the product. So I did, you know, I kind of went all out here. I wanted to support weighting. All criteria is not created equal. And so there might be some things that are a little less important. You know, again, if we're doing something where the purpose of it is to do machine learning and AI, I want to put a lot more weight into how well you delivered that particular criteria. And then just being able to support displaying and grouping. So if I'm just adding these, and all my choices are as alphabetical or the order I added them in, it's not going to look real kind of, it's not going to flow well, right? If I think of something I missed and want to come back and add that later, now it's down at the bottom of the list. So I said, okay, I want to be sure that I can make use of some kind of a display or grouping order and pull these things together. And then, so now I've got criteria, and this is where the model gets really challenging, is I've said, these are the things that the judges are going to rate against, but now I actually have to give the judges the ability to rate a team in a challenge against that particular thing. And this will make a lot more sense when we look at the app. So now the judges are rating and they're scoring the teams. I need somewhere to store not just the individual judges' score for this team, but the overall score for the team, and how the team ranked overall compared to the others. And even having some capability then to leverage that people's choice voting for like tie breaking and things like that. And one last thing I thought would really be over the top. Again, I've done a lot of hackathons in my time. And one of the biggest things, complaints or letdowns when you don't do well or don't win, even if you do, you get the prize, but you don't get the feedback, right? You put all this time, sometimes days, into building something, and you didn't win. You didn't even place, and you don't know why, right? And that feedback is what helps you become better as a developer, as a citizen developer with people. We need to know so we can grow. And so I wanted to make sure that as part of the judging, the judges can give feedback in these different areas around what they loved, why they voted the way they did. And I want to expose the scoring and weighting to the teams, right? This isn't top secret stuff. Now, I probably don't want other teams seeing the details and stuff. It should be isolated down to you as a team. So that poses another interesting challenge with out-of-the-box Plantain app, where you're going to need to extend a little bit beyond. However, I wanted to make like a nice one-pager, like a PDF document that's got a little bit of graphics and visual to it that shows you how you did and how you scored, how the judges scored you, and most importantly, what that feedback was. And it's a takeaway that every member of the team can have so that they can do a little retrospective afterwards. And hey, next time we maybe know that presentation matters and it's not all just technical. I've seen teams win with just smoke and mirrors because they knew how to sell it, you know, and teams that had some really amazing code didn't even place because no one really understood or knew what their solution did, right? They couldn't really see how it tied and solved the problem because it was so heavy duty in back-end processing and code and things. And so these little things matter and you learn and you grow. So without further ado, we're about kind of at the halfway point. That's what I was trying to accomplish, and we'll kind of maybe take a look and see what I was able to do and what I wasn't in 6 hours with Plantain app. So as always, I think, you know, first place usually to start is with the data model, and we will, but really quickly, I'll show you. I had my first criteria was I wanted to support those 3 different roles. So the first thing I did, besides hook up to GitHub, so that I had a good history and could recover things if I boo-booed, and just tell the tale of what I did in 6 hours and can keep building, and knowing that that in our roadmap right now is setting the stage to be able to use what's in GitHub to deploy to other environments or to restore automatically back into the system. So again, a plug for if you're not using the GitHub integration, it's free. Use it. It will pay you. It has benefits now, but it'll pay you forward tenfold in the future when we make that integration two-way. And so I've got the judge of the hackathon event. I've got the audience member, the people who can view and vote on hackathon entries. And lastly, I've got a participant, right? A member of a team participating in the hackathon or challenge. So that was the 3 roles. Manager role is built-in role that I decided like someone's got to be the one, not the developer, but the one that actually, once this system is built and we're going to put on a new hackathon, someone's got to be the one that can come in and kind of, okay, well, let me put an entry in and say there's going to be a new challenge 2 months from now, and let me define what the prizes are, and let me set up the judging criteria. Let me kind of set it up and also help things along, right? And that in Plantain app is always this manager role. Admin as well, but admin gets a little more into configuring the system. So either one of these 2 roles, I figured I was covered. There is a very powerful user who can interact and work with the application, but is not the one building it, right? So I didn't make like a challenge administrator or anything like that. Didn't need it. Users is here as a generic, and remember that's the one app role that does ship with the system. We're enforcing that, by the way, in release 1.13, and so anytime a new user is created, even if you use an action to create it, the user role will be given to them automatically. It is set behind the scenes as an automatic role because everyone needs to have a role. You don't want to have orphaned users off. If someone doesn't have a role, they won't even show up in this list. And so just a little FYI there as we go. So let's look at the entities. First one up at the top here is challenge, right? And this one's kind of the foundational and entity. And if we look, you can kind of see as the system mapped things out, all roads lead back to challenge. And it is where we define that we have essentially an event without having to call it an event. And so there are some lesser, we'll say, entities or lookup type things that we'll take a look at. One of the things I did want to do is show 2 things. One, let's take a look under the hood at how a couple of these are set up, but also a plug for in 1.12, if you haven't updated, super, super handy, right? One, I can come here and I can see what data I have defined for this entity. And in this case, there's kind of a lot, right? And where things get interesting is we get to the bottom. Some pretty basic stuff up here at top. Always you got to have a name, And that's to support this display name down here, right? The system needs to know that, look, you might have 100 fields. When I need to, without a lot of rigmarole, I need to just be able to know what an entry in this table is called, in this entity is called, which field represents that. I'll make links and do all kinds of neat stuff for you, but I got to know which one is the most kind of meaningful thing out of all of this. And I usually go with name as a consistent one. It's easy to remember as your list of tables grows. Sometimes, and we'll see, I've had a couple of instances where it didn't fit or work so well, and I picked something else. And we'll maybe take a peek at that. But you know, I have another entity over here. It's called challenge type, so that why stop at just hackathons, right? What if I want to have fundraisers or any other type of challenges, right? That we want to put on. Fundraising is one that comes to mind. Some kind of drive, we're doing something for charity. It's still a challenge. It still has some goals. It can still have some winners and prizes and voting and different things. It's just not building an app. And so again, what I was trying to do here is show you an example of really in the real world, when you're making something heavy duty that punches above its weight class, you're not going to define everything so simple and so static, and you're going to want to give yourself some of these things. And I always find myself creating types and statuses over and over again. Same thing here, status. If I just put every entry in here and then they're sitting out there for the world to see, how do I know? Like, status could be, it's a draft. I don't want to show it to anyone yet. We're still cooking this thing up. Hey, this thing is scheduled, right? You can now come and sign up. I need some indicator to the system and the business logic that's going to say who can see these things, who can interact with them. When it's done, you know, and maybe it's time to judge. So I knew I'd need status. And the nice thing about this is you create yourself a status entity. You don't need to know ahead of time what the statuses are going to be. You just need to know that you're going to need them, right? And so I defined an entity called status, and I linked it up. Now, a little kind of pro tip here, because that's really what I want to do today. If anything, maybe we'll get into some of the more advanced stuff, because this is a very complex system. And I'd at least like to let's walk through it together. I think there's a lot of great learning here for you all. And that's why ultimately we're doing this. And we'll get to see the thing next week. You'll all get to interact with it and play with it and stuff. And we can see how nice and polished it ended up being. But one of the things that I get asked a lot is, okay, if the first thing I'm starting with is challenge, and I come here and I know I'm going to have a status, right? And then I go, wait, there's no entity called status. So what do I do, right? Now I'm going to leave and lose everything. And so that's where, you know, a pound of prevention is, or an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. The system's forgiving. You can always come back and add things, but this is where you kind of want to think things out for a second and do that little bit of sketching, right? And so what I always do here is I will go and create first my challenge entity, or my primary kind of base entity that's going to drive a lot of the system, whatever it is. If this was like the team just hacked on a support center ticketing type challenge, right? That they were all had kind of same goals and objectives, just using different technology to achieve it. And so you're always going to be able to identify or know what's my main kind of base entity that the others are going to tie up to. So I say, okay, yeah, create that one first, but keep it really light. Just make name, for example, right? Hit save. The reason for that being is not only can you now go and create the other ones, but you also over here, when you need parent pages to say like, well, I don't want everything to be in the top level of the menu, right? And if you don't specify a parent page or have somewhere for these like status lookups and challenge types to live under, then they're just going to be put into the top level, and you got to come back and clean that stuff up later. And that definitely takes more time than thinking about it a little bit up front. And so what I do is I created the challenge entity, I hit save, I stopped. I then came back out, and we'll kind of do it in the order I did. And so I came and said, okay, well, I've got challenge types, right? And these are just simple entities. First thing you can see is that I have a place that I thought about. Now, I didn't put everything under challenge. We can see why or where I put these, but I have a little page I made, and I'll just kind of follow the flow as we go. You get to see how it was built. We'll go that way. So this new page management feature is in 1.12, and the difference between entities and pages is that when you define an entity, there's a data model, and it will create pages for you. Those pages are listed here, but sometimes you just need a page, right? A placeholder, and you don't need forms and grids and all that other stuff to go along with it. I just need a page. Or you're going to do something special with that page. It's going to be more HTML type work, and you're just making maybe your landing page, and it's something good looking and pretty, and it's got a button that says, hey, sign up for the hackathon, become a member, right? But there's no entity involved there. It could be your home page, right? And so you're going to need to be able to make pages and manage pages. And so I just created a page here, and I called it lookups. And I will hop over, and you'll see that I want lookups in the menu. I gave permissions to lookups to only be for like managers and admins, right? So now the nice thing is these pages like status and challenge type, this is one of the things that you sometimes run into without that feature I was talking about earlier, which is to give unauthenticated or all users read access to an entity without having to expose the whole shebang to them. So if we go back over here to challenge type, you'll see that in my permissions, what I had to do on every one of these, and I recommend you do this, and even when the new all users thing comes in, it'll be another entry down here, and it's a special role. You can't add, they can't, if you're not signed in, you can't add, you can't edit, you can't delete. There's ways to accomplish that, but I mean, out of the box, it doesn't make sense, right? And so all you can really set is, can they see nothing, or can they see everything? There is no own entries because we don't know who you are. You're just generically, do I want to expose this or not? Now, once I say all entries, and I want this in my menu, right? Because I am a user in this case that's acting on behalf of you know, the admin type user, and I wanted to go ahead and, for example, put my statuses in, and it's handy to have it here in the menu. Well, by creating this lookups page that's just a plain old page, not an entity, and setting its permissions, the way the platform works is that the parent takes precedence over the children. So if I've said you can't see this parent level item, then it will override your ability to see the child level items, right? And so now what I can do, if a regular, like next week when you sign in, you'll see you won't be able to see this menu option because you're not a manager, you're not an admin, right? And that's who really can work with this data. While we're here, I came up with a handful of statuses. It's active. That's when we're in the zone next week, and we're going to be, this one's underway. It's being judged. It's happening. Right now it's scheduled, right? We've got a date. People can sign up, that sort of thing. We're getting into place. Once it's done, about next week at this time, it's completed. You can no longer sign up, that sort of things, or judge. When I'm first cooking one up and I don't want to expose it to the world, it's a draft. And maybe I just boo-booed and I don't want to fully delete it, hard delete it. I want to soft delete it. Maybe there's some things in there that I want to borrow for another one, whatever, but I always give myself a soft delete backdoor until I'm ready to fully delete. So that's the 5 I came up with there. And to prevent getting too many windows open. I know kind of getting tight on time, so I'm going to move a little bit quicker here. So these are the basics. I won't go through all the basic ones. You get the gist of those, and I'm sure you encounter those plenty. The ones I do want to show you, though, that where things get very interesting, and we'll take a look, is when we start getting into these list ofs, right? Now, one quick thing is I took the shortcut route for like the overview and the requirements. These are just HTML text fields, right? So I can type up whatever, but I didn't go crazy trying to store all that in little granular database land. Someone's going to type up, what is this thing about? What are the requirements for it? What's your objective that you're trying to reach, right? I separated, I could have used date time for start and end date, but I separated them out just because I find it easier to work with, and I don't need to parse off time and different things like that. The system is very powerful in its ability to let you work with all kinds of date and times, but as you all know, it can get a little challenging under the hood technically. And so I just kept them simple to just dates and times. If I need to show them both, that's the power of tokens in the system. I can just say start date in brackets, space, end time in brackets, and now I'm showing the date and time without having to worry about it being stored like that in the database and things, right? So I made a Teams entity. Pretty straightforward, right? The team name, they get a little logo, who are the members, and we can take a look at the app here in a second. And sometimes, you know, the back end's good to get familiar with, but the front end is where this stuff really clicks and makes sense. I just want you to see that these list of entities, So I have judging criteria, and it's a list of, because I've defined criteria somewhere, and then I want to associate them to different challenges. This got hairy, but was very manageable. I need a list of judges. There's more than one judge, or can be. So I didn't want to just have judge 1, judge 2, judge 3. I could have done that. And that's that throwaway super fast app. Perfectly acceptable to do that. You need to crank something out in a day and have real people using it. I mean, that's what a spreadsheet is, right? And there's no shame in that. It just depends. Do you want reusability or not? And in this case, I did. And so I decided, okay, I'm actually going to kind of manage people and give them some roles and different things. And you know, this thing's going to live on. So list of is great for that. And then prizes, right? So I have a prizes entity, and then I have a list of prizes, because each challenge can have 1 or more prizes to it. And so that's where I've kind of paused for now. As far as my building goes, let's take a look at the front end. So the first thing, and everything I tried to do, I would say so far, 90% of everything you're going to see is just straight out of the box Plantain app with many minor low code touches, right? I made these fields be side by side. I made this, instead of being a drop down or radio boxes, I made them kind of pretty buttons. These are just, when I say low code, it's when you come here and you configure a thing, right? This is all the low codes land right here, right? Now you can get into code in here, but I just mean, I haven't done anything extraordinary here, other than, and you'll see there's a field, and this is one where I didn't finish it off, so we could finish it together. In my, you're going to basically now from the front end, there is an entity that's called person, and I will show it in the back end. I think this is a very important topic, and it comes up a lot. The system ships with a built-in user entity, right? This is you could almost think user account, right? This means you can sign into the system, you have roles, you have some properties, an email address, different things like that. But you'll notice I have no edit button, right? I don't have a lot of control over this one. It's very powerful and can do a lot of great stuff for me. But sometimes you want some flexibility. And so what I did in this case was I made a person entity of my own, okay? And I've done this a few times, and yeah, it's a little maybe redundant. And so I don't know that there's more than one way to do this. And a lot of this stuff is your preference. And as you build, you learn and grow. I've not found this to be too painful for me. And especially in this case, what I wanted was a really light, easy way to have under my purview and my control, and not need to get into, you know, user management. I'll do some syncing with a workflow or something behind the scenes, but you know, first name, last name, a display name, remember, because we need a display name. And what am I going to just do first name? Then it's Joe, and there's 3 Joes. So I always like to do a display name, get a kind of a combo going, and we'll see how we did that. And then I said, this person has a type in this system. It's one of our 3 key roles, right? You're either a judge, you're a participant, or you're in the audience, right? You're the people. I went ahead and grabbed email, and an interesting field here though is I have DNN user, and this is where I make that connection. And you'll notice I've linked into the user entity. It's not like I've abandoned the user entity. What I found is that this is quite powerful, and it's kind of the best of both worlds. So when I need, like when a person signs in, I don't actually know what person they are, because I know what user they are. And that's great, because I can access their actual roles and other things about them that are session-based and stuff in the system as they're interacting. That's handy. But I can also very easily take this ID and through any number of things, including soon to be a workflow that I can run as a token that I can drop anywhere I want, just pass in a user ID and get everything I need about a person, right? So I've not found it bad at all. And I think once this token, run a workflow as a token comes, this sort of stuff's going to become really gravy to do, and gives you, again, lots of power. So this DNN user, the reason I show you this is one thing I didn't customize. You're going to come here next week, and you're going to want to sign up as a participant, right? And so you're going to give me your, your name. This calculates for me. So this was a little low-codey thing I did, pretty simple stuff. You pick one of the roles. Now these are the real roles out of the system. I limited it down to only these 3, not every role. I'm not gonna let you pick to be a low-code engineer or an admin or anything like that. We'll take a look how I did that. So you'll say I'm a participant. and you'll, give me a, now, what are you supposed to pick here? Because you don't have a user account yet, right? Well, in reality, the reason this is exposed and this is out of the box is because I have that field defined, that property defined in my entity, right? And so what no one should really be picking this. So one of the customizations that I left here, just to show what do you do in this kind of scenario, as we build a little bit here, is you can simply come, and there's two places. One here is to say show conditionally, right? Don't do it here. The reason being, this field is wired up and the form is, and the logic and things are ready to work with it. Let that be. You might want to, again, I have that admin or manager role, and maybe I do, someone goes, I goofed up, you know how it is. I registered twice and this is really my account. Great, it's a drop down. I can come in and pick, right? But this show conditionally is really a server. When the form first loads, it runs on the server, the backend. It goes and figures everything out and says, what kind of form should I build for you? And it means take this field completely out of circulation. When someone goes and submits, it never existed. It never got built. So if you don't want the thing, you want to hide it, or conditionally just be like, not appropriate, you can do that here. The one that you want to use is the bind expression. And I'll just say has role. That's one of the kind of ships with the system tokens. And we can say admin. So only if you have the role admin will you see this thing visible, right? Now, after I save here, I will see it, okay? And because I'm an admin. And we're going to say maybe just for the purposes of showing you it actually hides. So when you're logged in as like a super user, very powerful user, whenever these things evaluate, you by default have every role, even if they weren't specifically assigned to you as a user, right? There's a lot of reasons for that. The main one being so you don't get locked and blocked out of working with things in the system, right? You're going to see it all. And so when you're testing, you would go in as an admin type user to see, does this really work? Now, for us here real quick, I'm going to use a little logic and say, maybe 12. These things won't evaluate. I'm doing something that won't evaluate. This will be hidden now. Only thing is, I still want the field to get submitted, right? And if it's hidden, it won't get submitted. It will get populated with a value once it's set up and things like that. And so there's a setting here that you'll want to know about and kind of not forget about. It's this submit hidden fields. And so you'll want to turn this option on so that even when fields are conditionally hidden, they still get submitted, right? Otherwise, they're ignored. And what will happen is, even if a person has a user ID, when you go and edit or whatever, I guess I could have just said 0. So I think me being like a super user, I'm still gonna evaluate true in my logic there, but this wouldn't show. So I can come, I can pick, but what would happen if this was hidden and this user, this was a user that was all created and I'm editing and I'm changing my display name, I want a cool nickname or something like that, or I want to change my email address, this field would not get submitted to the backend, and now you're going to lose that connection. And that's why you want to set that setting. And so that's what this does. And let's take a look at kind of I'll give you the fast now tour of the world in the last 5 minutes. So I've got these challenges. So I met my objective there. I have the ability to define challenges and give all this information that we saw. Pretty straightforward stuff. Once it's created though, and let's go look at one of these. And this is where those list of entities came in, right? So this is kind of the basics, the requirements, the status of it, the type of it, it's a hackathon, all that kind of stuff. I have prizes that I can add and define on the fly and for what place they go for, right? I could say maybe like 4 and it's people's choice, the people pick your prize. Wouldn't that be cool? And there it's in there. And so now when teams are coming and they're wanting to sign up and things like that, they can be like, well, do I want to get in on this one? What are the prizes, right? Ooh, a new car, a day off, or an Amazon gift card. Depends on what I place, right? And this one's pretty straightforward as well. I did a little bit of rigging up here in that when I go to add a judge, the list of judges needs to only be people that are in that judge's role, right? And so on the form, it basically out of the box, because I said this is an entity and it's going against the person entity, not the user entity, right? The person entity. And so I've got people, when you sign up on that registration page, there's a little workflow that runs, and it basically says, hey, yep, block and tackle CRUD, create a person record, right? But you're not done. Take that person record, pass it over to a workflow that says, go also create a system user, and then give them the role that they wanted to sign up for, right? So there's like 3 steps in this workflow. And then it says, hey, make the association. Come back, that person record I just created that was missing the DNN user, go ahead and just do a partial update. Take this user ID of the user I just created and put into the system and do that little update. Now you're complete, you're done, you get an email, welcome. It's really straightforward. And you'll basically be able to sign right on in and be looking at this stuff. Now, if you're a judge, you can see, if you're anyone, you can see who the judges are, right? As they're coming in. What you can't do is add them, right? So I could create a new judge, or I could add an existing judge. And this is only the people, see? So like guest judge, mystery judge, these are just people that are in that judge's role that are there. And all I did was add to the where clause. So that was already a drop down the system built for me. It already knows to go show the persons. And remember, this is one of those things where I had in my person entity, right? And one of the reasons I like this person pattern is that I made a little field for myself called type. And that's what you were selecting when you registered. Well, it becomes really easy to filter the list when I'm not having to go and query and search who has this role and all this kind of detailed stuff that's stored off in system tables. I can just come and say, hey, show me a list of persons that type is judge, right? And so the last thing we'll kind of look at today with our time is this judging criteria. And this one was a little bit challenging. This is where the thinking really had to happen. Hold on. Why are you messing with me? I swear this worked 5 minutes ago. Replace a null. I'm not sure what's happening there. Well, let's look at it from this angle first. So before I even have judging criteria or tied to a thing, I actually have an entity, separate entity that's just called judging criteria. And so in here is where I come and I define, not here, it's criteria. I think I made it as a lookup. There we go. Before I associate it to a challenge, I came and defined it here, right? And so I have a theme, it's an entity, idea and team, experience, implementation, presentation. These are my available menu of options for any challenge. And I can pick and associate which ones of these are we going to be judging on, right? I give it a name and I give it a short description. Then when I'm over here, this is really odd. Not sure if I think I'm maybe having computer trouble because this has been working rock solid. Let's see if I can at least, there we go, pop the form up. So now you can see I've associated these criteria, right? And when you do, the difference here is I just pick from my menu, oh yeah, this one. And what order do I want this to show up in? Ticking my box for display order. And then I went a little out of the box and I turned the weight field, which is a decimal, into a slider. And so that humans aren't having to look at 0.15 and things like that, I made a little extra label and I just do some basic, some quick math so that as you're sliding, this changes. And as you add these, it will total them up because we want to make sure we come out to 100. And so that's where I got to. What's left is now using the same pattern is for the judges to be able to come and say, well, now I want to judge. And when they come to say they want to judge, we need to come look up out of, well, what are the available criteria? And we're going to pop that up and each judge is going to be able to rate and score. So now you're going to have actual scoring based on the criteria that's defined for this particular challenge. Once all the judges have scored, we're going to tally up and say what was the team's final score, and we're going to show some rankings. So that's what this will all be ready to go, and we'll be doing this live next week and be picking a winner, and also checking out, it's a really great chance to see what these other platforms and these other competitors do. Some things better, some things not so much, and it'll be interesting to see what's what there, and what are some different interesting ways that things are getting solved and how the teams did. So really hoping you tune in and you participate next week and check this out and vote and help pick who wins the new car.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. Should I put a disclaimer there, Reza? It's not a real car. I was going to
show up with a toy car. Spoilers.
Okay. So yeah, thanks everyone for being here again. And next week it's a big thing. I think understanding the various solutions out there, because as Plant and App we don't see us as replacing everything out there, but we see us as cooperating with some other platforms, like we saw Zapier last week, very powerful techniques where you can get a lot more value. So we live in a big world where there is place for all low-code and no-code platforms to solve various parts of the problem. So thank you again, and see you next week.